An Italian guy is out picking up women in Rome. While at his favorite bar, he manages to attract one rather attractive-looking blonde. So they're back at his place, and sure enough, they go at it. After they are done, the Italian sits back pleased. Then he rolls over, lights up a cigarette, and asks her, "So, you finish?" After a slight pause, she replies, "No." Surprised, but pleasantly, he puts out his cigarette, rolls back on top of her, and has his way with her again, this time lasting even longer than the first. Again he rolls over, lights a cigarette, and asks, "So, you finish?" And again, after a short pause, she simply says, "No." Stunned, but still acting reflexively on his macho pride, he once again puts out the cigarette and mounts his companion du jour. This time, with all the strength he could muster up, he barely manages to end the task. But he does, after quite some time, and energy is spent. Barely able to roll over, he reaches for his cigarette, lights it again, and then asks tiredly, "So, please, you finish?" No, I'm Swedish," says the blonde. I've heard some people are really going crazy from isolation. I'm glad I'm not one of those. I've just been talking about this with the microwave and toaster while drinking coffee, and all of us agreed that things are getting bad. I didn't mention anything to the washing machine as she puts a different spin on everything. Certainly not to the fridge, as he is acting cold and distant. The sink just said everything is going down the drain. In the end, the iron calmed me down as she said, "Everything will be fine. The situation isn't that pressing." The vacuum was very unsympathetic, told me to just suck it up, but the fan was more optimistic and felt it would all soon blow over. The toilet looked a bit flushed when I asked its opinion, and it didn't say anything, but the doorknob told me to get a grip. The front door said I was unhinged, and then the curtains told me to pull myself together. Two caterpillars are escaping a spider. They climb up a branch and get to the edge, but realize they are now trapped. "Hold on tight," says the first caterpillar, and he quickly chews through the branch. It snaps and they begin to fall, but he grabs two protruding twigs and uses them to steer the branch through the air with grace and finesse. "That's amazing," says the second caterpillar. "How in the hell are you doing that?" The first caterpillar scoffs. "Am I the only one in the whole darn forest who knows how to drive a stick?" I saw a woman drop her purse in the high street this morning, so I quickly followed her. As I was just about to tap her on the shoulder, she started running for a bus. So I ran after her, shouting, "You dropped your purse! You dropped your purse!" She didn't hear me and proceeded to get onto the bus, so I got on the bus too. As I walked to the back of the bus, I breathlessly said, "You floor your purse on the floor outside McDonald's." "Thank you so much," she exclaimed. "Where is it?" "I just told you, on the floor outside McDonald's." Nanga. One day, little Johnny, who was only 4 years old at the time, was taking a shower with his mother when all of a sudden he noticed the space between his mother's legs. "Mum, what's that black spot between your legs?" he asked her, to which she replied, "Oh, Johnny, that's just my little black sponge." Cool. He thought to himself, and that day at kindergarten he told all of his friends about it. Of course, they didn't believe him, so he told them to jump on their bikes after school and go to his place and take a look themselves. Well, they all jump on their bikes and eventually arrive at Johnny's place. Little Johnny comes bursting through the front door of his house, with all of his friends following him, yelling out, "Mom! Mom! Come here!" She comes out of the kitchen and says to Johnny, "What is it, Johnny? What do you want?" To which he says, "My friends are here to see your little black sponge, Mum. Come on, show it to them." Well, she had to think quick to avoid an embarrassing situation. So she says to Johnny, I can't show them my little black sponge because I lost it. Well, all of little Johnny's friends are immensely disappointed with him, and all call him a liar as they jump back onto their bikes and ride home. Poor little Johnny is so upset that he runs upstairs to his room, crying his eyes out. Anyway, a couple of minutes later, he comes running back down the stairs, yelling out, "Mum! Mum! I found your little black sponge!" His mum comes out of the kitchen and says, "What are you talking about, Johnny? What did you find?" To which little Johnny replied, "I found your little black sponge, Mum. It's upstairs. The maid is washing Daddy's face with it." "Eindu!" A man comes running to the doctor, shouting and screaming in pain. "Please, doctor, you've got to help me. I've been stung by a bee." "Don't worry," says the doctor. "I'll put some cream on it. You will never find that bee. It must be miles away by now." "No, you don't understand," answers the doctor. "I'll put some cream on the place you were stung." "Oh, it happened in the garden in back of my house." No, says the doctor, getting frustrated. "I mean, on which part of your body did that bee sting you?" "On my finger," screamed the man in pain. "The bee stung me on my finger and it really hurts." "Which one?" "The doctor." "How am I supposed to know? All the bees look the same to me." Our man settles in his seat next to the window on a plane when another man sits down next to him and seats his black Labrador retriever in between them. The first man looks very quizzically at the dog and asks why he's allowed on the plane. The second man explains that he's a DEA agent, sniffing dog. His name is Sniffer and he's the best there is. "I'll show you once we get airborne, when I put him to work." The plane takes off, and once it has leveled out, the agent says, "Watch this." He tells Sniffer to search. Sniffer jumps down, walks along the aisle, and finally sits very purposefully next to a woman for several seconds. Sniffer then returns to its seat and puts one paw on the agent's arm. The agent says, "Good boy," and he turns to the man and says, "That woman is in possession of marijuana, so I'm making a note of her seat number and the authorities will apprehend her when we land." "Say, that's pretty neat," replies the first man. Once again, the agent sends Sniffer to search the aisles. The lab sniffs about, sits down beside a man for a few seconds, returns to its seat, and this time he places two paws on the agent's arm. The agent says, "That man is carrying cocaine. So again, I am making a note of his seat number for the police." "I like it," says his seatmate. The agent then tells Sniffer to search again. Sniffer walks up and down the aisles for a little while, sits down for a moment, and then comes racing back to the agent, jumps into the middle seat and proceeds to poop all over the place. The first man is really grossed out by this behavior and can't figure out how or why a well-trained dog would act like that. So he asks the agent, "What's going on?" The agent nervously replies, "He just found a bomb." 7. The Presbyterian Church called a meeting to decide what to do about their squirrel infestation. After much prayer and consideration, they concluded that the squirrels were predestined to be there, and they should not interfere with God's divine will. At the Baptist Church, the squirrels had taken an interest in the baptistry. The deacons met and decided to put a water slide on the baptistry and let the squirrels drown themselves. The squirrels liked the slide and, unfortunately, knew instinctively how to swim, so twice as many squirrels showed up the following week. The Lutheran Church decided that they were not in a position to harm any of God's creatures, so they humanely trapped their squirrels and set them free near the Baptist Church. 2 weeks later, the squirrels were back when the Baptists took down the water slide. The Episcopalians tried a much more unique path by setting out pans of whiskey around their church in an effort to kill the squirrels with alcohol poisoning. They sadly learned how much damage a band of drunk squirrels can do, but the Catholic Church came up with a more creative strategy. They baptized all the squirrels and made them members of the church. Now they only see them at Christmas and Easter. Not much was heard from the Jewish synagogue. They took the first squirrel and circumcised him. They haven't seen a squirrel since. Yet. Many years ago, a man was traveling through the mountains of Switzerland. Nightfall was rapidly approaching, and he had nowhere to sleep. He went up to a farmhouse and asked the farmer if he could spend the night. The farmer told him that he could sleep in the barn. As the story goes, the farmer's daughter asked her father, "Who is that man going into the barn?" "That fellow's traveling through," said the farmer. "Needs a place to stay for the night, so I told him he could sleep in the barn." The daughter said, "Perhaps he is hungry." So she prepared him a plate of food for him and then took it out to the barn. About an hour later, the daughter returned, her clothing disheveled and straw in her hair. Straight up to bed she went. The farmer's wife was very observant. She then suggested that perhaps the man was thirsty. So she fetched a bottle of wine, took it out to the barn, and she too did not return for an hour. Her clothing was askew, her blouse buttoned incorrectly. She also headed straight to bed. The next morning at sunrise, the man in the barn got up and continued on his journey, waving to the farmer as he left. When the daughter awoke and learned that the visitor was gone, she broke into tears. How could he leave without even saying goodbye? She cried. "We made such passionate love last night." "What?" shouted the father as he angrily ran out of the house looking for the man, who by now was halfway up the mountain. The farmer screamed up at him, "I'm going to get you! Slept with my daughter!" The man looked back down from the mountainside, cupped his hand next to his mouth, and yelled out, "Lay the oladi too!" 9. Some European explorers were traveling through the Amazon rainforest with some natives as guides when they started hearing drums in the distance. Puzzled, the Europeans inquired, "We hear drums. What does that mean?" The natives answered, "When drums stop, very bad." Reluctantly, the exploration continues. After 5 minutes, the drums had started getting louder, and the explorers started getting nervous. The drums sound closer, and we think they're getting louder. What does it mean? When drums stop, very bad. Doing their best to maintain composure, the Europeans kept moving. About 5 minutes later, the drums abruptly stop and the explorers panic. "The drums have stopped! What should we do?" When drums stop, very bad. Now comes bass solo. But a British anthropology professor travels around Africa, researching his next book. In Zanzibar, he decides to rent a local boat with a guide to travel. The journey is slow, and the boatman is silent. Before long, he gets restless and bored. He seeks to converse with the boatman. "Tell me," he says to him, "do you know biology, psychology, geography, geology, or anthropology?" The boatman said, "No, I don't know any of these." "Then your brain is too small for me," said the professor haughtily. "You will probably die ignorant." The boatman said nothing, and they awkwardly continued. An hour later, the boat sprung a leak and started to sink. The boatman asked the panicked tourist, "Do you know any swimology and escapology from crocodileology?" "What?" spluttered the professor. "No." The boat guy replied, "Well then today you will drown. Ology and crocodilology will eat your buttology." Badinondre? A white guy goes to Jamaica on vacation. On his first day there, he goes to a bar. After a few drinks, he goes to the bathroom. As he pees, behind him enters a Jamaican man who walks up next to him and begins to relieve himself as well. The white guy glances unintentionally and notices the Jamaican man has a penis tattoo. Surprised, he claims, "Hey, I have the same penis tattoo as you." Starts with a W and ends with a Y. The white guy happily shows his tattoo and says, "Look, I got Wendy for my wife." The Jamaican laughs and replies, "Nah, mon, they aren't the same. Mine says, 'Welcome to Jamaica, mon. Have a nice day.'" Bunnirendu. Cinderella was now 75 years old. After a fulfilling life with the now passed-away prince, she happily sat upon her rocking chair, watching the world go by from her front porch, with a cat called Alan for companionship. One sunny afternoon, out of nowhere, appeared the fairy godmother. Cinderella said, "Fairy godmother, what are you doing here after all these years?" The fairy godmother replied, "Well, Cinderella, as you have lived a good, wholesome life since we last met, I have decided to grant you 3 wishes. Is there anything for which your heart still yearns?" Cinderella was overjoyed, and after some thoughtful consideration, almost under her breath, she uttered her first wish. "I wish I was wealthy beyond comprehension." Instantly, her rocking chair was turned into solid gold. Cinderella was stunned. Alan, her old faithful cat, jumped off her lap and scampered to the edge of the porch, quivering with fear. Cinderella said, "Oh, thank you, fairy godmother." The fairy godmother replied, "It's the least I can do. What does your heart desire for your second wish?" Cinderella looked down at her frail body and said, "I wish I were young and full of the beauty of youth again." At once, her wish became reality, and her beautiful youthful visage returned. Cinderella felt stirrings inside her that had been dormant for years, and long-forgotten vigor and vitality began to course through her very soul. Then the fairy godmother again spoke. "You have one more wish. What will you have?" Cinderella looked over to the frightened cat in the corner and said, "I wish you to transform Alan, my old cat, into a beautiful and handsome young man." Magically, Alan suddenly underwent a fundamental change in his biological makeup, that when complete, he stood before her a boy so beautiful, the likes of which neither she nor the world had ever seen. So fair indeed that birds began to fall from the sky at his feet. The fairy godmother again spoke. "Congratulations, Cinderella. Enjoy your new life." And with a blazing shock of bright blue electricity, she was gone. For a few eerie moments, Alan and Cinderella looked into each other's eyes. Cinderella sat, breathless, gazing at the most stunningly perfect boy she had ever seen. Then Alan walked over to Cinderella, who sat transfixed in her rocking chair, and held her close in his strong, youthful arms. He leaned in close to her ear, whispered, blowing her golden hair with his warm breath, "I bet you regret having me neutered now, don't you?"